experiment that you too can take part in online to find out which species of web animal you are. Our aim is to discover the impact the web is having on our brains.
Is this test a genuine first?
Absolute first, a global first. Nobody's ever done this before. Nobody even knows what's going to come out of it.
To give us a first indication, we've brought together 100 people who represent different ages and genders. Some use the web rarely, others all the time.
Look at your screen, concentrate on what you have to do, click start, and that game will begin.
We are especially interested in the 12 and 18-year-old age groups because their brains have been formed only knowing life with the web. How does their behavior compare to people who rarely use the web and to serial users like myself?
You've got to look at the pictures, you've got to look at the numbers, you've got to look at the letters, you've got to make a decision. Is it an odd number? Is it an even number? Is it a vowel? Is it a consonant? It's a bit too much for my brain.
The results from our initial survey of 100 volunteers seem to confirm what many suspect. Generation Web seemed to display more fox-like behavior. They answered their questions after looking at half the number of web pages and only spending 1/6 of the time viewing the information than their elders did. So it seems pretty clear to me that, for good or ill, the younger generation is being remolded by the web. Facebook's feedback loops are revolutionizing how they relate. There's empirical evidence now that information overload and associative thinking may be reshaping how they think. For many, this seems to be a bleak prospect. Young people bouncing and flitting through a thoughtless, throwaway virtual world. But are we being too harsh? Are we failing to spot something valuable about this new culture?
We go on singing the old song of fragmentation and alienation because every society always looks at the preceding age while living in a new current one, never sees the age it's living in.
You might be surprised to learn that that was recorded in the 1960s, and the person who was speaking was the Canadian maverick thinker Marshall McLuhan.
In 1968, McLuhan took up a year's professorship in New York. It was the perfect destination for him as he was enthralled by the hustle and bustle of modern life. He positively welcomed the kind of future that the web has now given us.
McLuhan thought that the coming of the electronic age would speed up the movement of information, injecting new life into the mundane mechanical era. He thought that the rules, the regulations, the beliefs of the 19th century would be overturned as we were forced to dance to the faster rhythm of the electronic information loop.
In the 1960s, he told a story of how, in the future, we'll all be connected in real time, and our messages will just sort of flow as if we were sitting next to each other. You know, as if we were right there. And that's just a profound thing to say in 1968.
I'm off to visit web entrepreneur Jonah Peretti, who believes McLuhan's dreams are now playing out in Homointerneticus. That spoof cat videos and dancing men are actually evidence of a sophisticated, interactive culture at work.
McLuhan realized that people always judge new media by the standards of old media. So in this case, you see that the internet is all about the social relationships and the network, but people still judge it as if it was static content. And so you look at it and say, oh, this is a silly cat video, and judge it as content, instead of saying, oh, this was something that one person created in their garage, that 3 other people collaborated on and added to, that was now being used to satirize a political campaign, and that it's part of a web of creativity and a network of sharing that is actually more interesting and important than the media itself.
I think a lot of people would look at so much of what goes on online, you know, the memes, the silliness, the kittens that are stuffed inside glass vases and all these kinds of things that literally get sent around everywhere. as a distraction, as a bit of a waste of time, as actually not particularly worthwhile. But at the same time, you're seeing it as something that has a sophistication, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I mean, when you think about things that are a waste of time, think about the average sitcom, right? Or the average Hollywood movie. You know, you sit there passively, there's not really much to do except just passively consume this media that's for the lowest common denominator. When you look at viral culture, what you see is people much more engaged. You know, so you mentioned kittens and glasses. The Bonsai Kitten project was a fake site that made it look like instructions for how to make bonsai kittens, where you put them in jars and they get funny shapes and you can make your very own. It was a total prank. And the person who created it launched it by telling a bunch of animal rights activists about it and said, "You'll love this." Of course, he knew that they would freak out and hate it and send it all around. But then as a consumer, when you see that, you have to go through a sophisticated thought process where you say, it's a joke, I think it's funny and I like it and I'm going to send it to people. Or it's a joke and I think it's still offensive and I'm going to fight it and organize. And it breaks people into different groups of how they feel about it, and they can react and interact with the media and become part of the story, where the people are actually powering the media that's spreading around and changing and evolving. Once you figure out some of the principles of how things spread online, how do you make something that when people see it, they want to share it or pass it along or bring more people in? It can work for silly things or for serious things.
The apparently superficial culture of young people on the web can have a serious side and a direct impact on the real world. One of the most powerful examples for me can be seen in how Generation Web is re-engaging with politics.
What is required of us now is a new era of responsibility, a recognition on the part of every American that we have duties to ourselves, our nation, and the world.
I made the decision in February of 2007, pretty early on, to take a leave from Facebook and go and work full-time for the Obama campaign. The campaign from the start was really interested in running a bottoms-up grassroots initiative, which happened to intersect directly with everything that was happening online in 2006, 2007, 2008.
Barack Obama!
The young users of YouTube, Facebook, MySpace, and Twitter became central to the campaign.
We had members of Congress on Twitter. We had protesters organizing through Twitter outside. We had the president on Twitter using it to campaign. And we had everyone in the country, well, not everyone, but a lot of folks across the country using Twitter to express their opinions on the hot topics. So we sort of had like the entire spectrum.
During the election year, Obama had 3 million Facebook friends. And studies show a third of all under 30-year-olds used social networking to communicate their politics. That figure was negligible 4 years earlier. 2/3 watched political videos online. A quarter forwarded them on or remixed the material.
'Cause I gotta cry. Can't wait till 2008. Baby, you're the best candidate.
What we were able to do was figure out how people could do it their way, and that there was a really it's a groundswell of energy and enthusiasm, both in terms of fundraising, but also in terms of time spent volunteering for the campaign.
America, we have come so far. We have seen so much, but there's so much more to do.
Election night in Chicago was something I think anybody who was there will have to say will never happen again.
It was indescribable. I mean, it was a really important moment for the country above everything else. We were all just so emboldened by the fact that not only had we done it, but we'd done it differently. And that made everything all the more powerful.
The technology of the web, with its feedback loops and associative connections, appears to have attracted young people to politics on a scale that hasn't been seen for generations. All around the world, as we've seen, young people, for better or worse, are harnessing the power of the web to fight their causes. From the uprising in Iran to the young Russian hackers who